The night was supposed to be routine, a quiet exchange in the dark corners of the city. But when the black car stopped and she was pulled inside, the world shifted. The man who ruled with iron commands and silent threats never expected that the woman trembling in his back seat would one day make him kneel. She had been raised far from violence, in a small town where people still believed in the safety of love and the promise of mornings. Yet fate had other plans. A single mistake, a wrong identity, and she was dragged into a world of guns, power, and fear. He was known as the ghost of the underworld, cold, unreachable, untouchable. His orders shaped the rhythm of the city's crime. His word could end wars. No one dared look him in the eye, not until her. Inside the mansion where she was kept, fear should have broken her. But there was something in her silence that unsettled him more than screams ever could. The woman he thought was fragile carried a strength he didn't understand. And for the first time, the predator found himself afraid. Not of her, but of what she awakened inside him. Rain poured over the city like judgment. The streets glistened under the dim streetlights as the black convoy moved through the night. Inside the car, the air was heavy with tension. She sat blindfolded, wrists tied, heart racing to a rhythm that didn't belong to her world. He sat opposite her, expression unreadable, a shadow carved in silence. The men around them avoided speaking. Everyone knew their boss didn't tolerate unnecessary words, but his gaze lingered on her longer than it should have. There was no defiance in her, only fear mixed with quiet dignity. "Who sent you?" His voice finally broke the silence. It was calm, controlled, but sharp enough to make her flinch. "No one. Please, I don't even know who you are," she stammered, voice trembling. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Everyone says that at first." She shook her head, desperate. "You've made a mistake. I'm not who you think I am." For a moment he said nothing. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Something in her voice, the sincerity, the raw panic, stirred something long buried in him. He dismissed the feeling with a quiet exhale. Compassion had no place in his world. When they arrived at the estate, the gates opened without a word. Guards lined the hall as she was led inside. The mansion was vast, cold, filled with marble and silence. He followed behind, every step echoing authority. "Lock her in the east room," he ordered. "No one enters without my permission." The guards obeyed instantly. As they pulled her away, she turned once more toward him, eyes filled with disbelief and something else, a strange mix of anger and sorrow. It lingered in his mind long after the door closed behind her. Later that night, he stood before the fireplace, staring at the flames. His most trusted man entered quietly. "She's no spy, boss," the man said. "Her name's Anna, a teacher. We checked everything. Wrong place, wrong time." He didn't respond. For the first time he questioned an order he had given. The thought unsettled him. "Should we let her go?" the man asked carefully. He turned, eyes cold again. No, not yet, but deep down he already knew. He wasn't keeping her for answers. He was keeping her because, for reasons he couldn't explain, her presence silenced the noise inside him. Outside her room, she sat by the window, staring at the rain through the bars. Her mind raced between fear and disbelief. Who was this man who ruled the city through terror, yet looked at her with eyes that seemed broken? When the door opened the next morning and he entered, she stood, startled. He didn't speak for a moment, just watched her, a captive who looked like she was praying for the both of them. "You'll stay here until I decide otherwise," he said. Her chin lifted slightly. "And what will you do with me?" His silence said more than any threat. He didn't know. For the first time in his life, he had no plan. As he left the room, his heart betrayed him with a single thought he refused to admit. She wasn't his prisoner. She was his undoing. The door opened without warning. He stepped in, the morning light cutting a pale edge across his face. She had decided in the night that fear would not speak for her anymore. "Are you going to tell me your name?" she asked, calm but firm. He hesitated, as if names were secrets too expensive to trade. "Cassian," he said at last. "Cassian," she repeated, and the sound of it softened something he didn't know how to protect. "I'm Anna. I teach literature. I quote poems when I'm scared." "I don't believe in poems," he said. "Then you don't believe in rescue?" He should have laughed. Instead, his gaze shifted to the window, to the garden where the world looked normal. "What would rescue look like to you, Anna?" "Being heard before being judged," she said. "Being treated like a person, not a piece on your board." He stepped closer, not enough to threaten, only enough to listen. "Tell me why you were there last night." "I was helping a friend close her shop. The street was empty. I heard footsteps. After that, your men." Her voice held steady, anchored by truth. "It's not complicated." "Nothing in my world is simple," he said. It wasn't an excuse, it was a confession. She noticed the painting above the fireplace, a storm breaking over a dark sea, a small boat in the corner. "You chose that on purpose." "Why would I choose a storm?" "Because you know what it feels like to be the boat." He blinked. She had stepped into his silence as if it were a room that could be lit. He looked toward the sideboard where a silver frame lay face down. Without asking, she picked it up and turned it over. A young woman smiled from the photograph, sunlight washing her shoulders. Anna set the frame back, gently. "Is she why you don't believe in poems?" "She is why I don't believe in promises," he said. "People break them, and when they do, they don't always get to keep their hearts." "You still have yours," Anna said. "I can hear it in the way you avoid the truth." He almost smiled, a rare and fragile shift across his features. "You think I'm avoiding the truth?" "I think you are carrying it like a weapon that turned in your hand." He studied her, the way she kept her shoulders squared even when she was tired. "What would you do if I let you walk into that garden right now?" "I'd breathe," she said. "I'd pray, and I'd come back inside because running wouldn't change what's broken in you." "Why would you come back?" "Because I'm not the one who needs the door open." Silence let the words find their place. He took a breath that tasted like winter leaving. For the first time, Cassian sat not like a ruler, but like a man who had forgotten how chairs worked when he wasn't commanding a room. "You were taken by mistake," he said. "But mistakes in my world have a price. If I let you go without answers, someone will come and ask questions with noise." "Then ask me," she said. "Ask me anything." He did. He asked about her mother's cookbook stained with vanilla, about the old tree by the river where students tied ribbons when they passed their exams, about the way stories become anchors when storms refuse to end. She answered without bargaining, and the more she spoke, the more the house seemed to breathe. "Why aren't you crying?" he asked quietly. "Because you already are," she said, and then amended, kinda, "only in places no one can see." His lips tightened, not in anger, but restraint. "You want to go home. I want the person who made the mistake to make the right choice now," she said. "And I want him to know it won't make him weak." Footsteps paused outside the door. Cassian's gaze flicked to the handle. He didn't invite interruptions. "Come back later," he called. A pause, then retreating steps. He turned again to Anna. "My people think mercy is a language that gets you killed." Maybe it is, but so is silence. A shadow of something like admiration passed through him. "If you were free, what would you do first?" "I would write this down before I forget how it felt," she said. "And I would ask people who hear this story to tell me what they would have done in my place. If you're watching, leave a comment and tell us what question you would have asked Cassian now. We're building something small and honest, and your voice helps us reach our first 100 hearts." He tilted his head. "You speak as if someone else is listening." "Someone always is," she said softly, "even when we pretend they aren't." He stood, slower this time, and walked to the window. The garden lay quiet, washed with sun. "If I untie your hands, do you promise not to run?" "I promise to stay where the truth is." she said. He moved behind her, fingers careful, and loosened the knot. Her wrists bore faint marks. She didn't hide them. He didn't look away. You can walk in the garden, he said. With 2 guards at a distance. You will be safe. Safe, she repeated, as if testing the word in a language she was relearning. Will you come with me? He almost said no. Leaders never walked without purpose, but purpose had changed its shape. For a moment, he said. They stepped into the corridor. The house seemed to lean in, listening. In the garden, sunlight fell through the leaves as if time had a reason to be kind. She paused beside a row of white flowers, brushed a petal with her fingertip, and then turned to him. You asked what rescue looks like. Sometimes it looks like this. 2 people standing where they used to refuse to stand. And sometimes it ends, he said, before either of them knows what they have. Does it have to? He didn't answer. A soft wind moved through the branches. Somewhere, a phone buzzed in a guard's pocket and then stilled. Anna glanced at the house, at the windows like watchful eyes. You can let me go, she said, and still keep me safe. How? He asked. By choosing the kind of man who doesn't need bars to protect what matters. He was about to speak when the garden's quiet broke. One of the outer gates clicked open, a sound too deliberate to be a mistake. Cassian's gaze sharpened. He signaled the guards with a quiet nod, and they moved toward the path. The gate creaked again. A figure paused in the gap, half hidden by climbing vines. Cassian's jaw tightened by a fraction. You know him, Anna said. I trusted him, Cassian replied, voice low. The figure stepped fully into view, hands raised as if in peace, but his eyes told a different story. Boss, he called softly, we need to talk. Cassian lifted a hand, not in welcome, but in warning. Say it from there. It's about last night, the man said. About the girl. Word is out. They're coming to trade her for blood. Anna felt the air change, a hush before a wave. Cassian's expression didn't move, but something inside him did. Who told them she was here? He asked. The man hesitated, and that was answer enough. Cassian took a single step forward, then stopped. He turned to Anna, and for the first time, fear crossed his eyes, not for himself, but like a silent plea, asking her to trust him 1 second longer. Stay with me, he said. The outer gate swung wider with a scrape that sounded like a promise breaking. The moment the gate opened wider, the world outside vanished into noise. Cassian pushed Anna gently behind him, eyes fixed on the intruder now flanked by 2 armed men. The garden that had been calm seconds ago now smelled of iron and rain. Who else knows she's here? Cassian asked again, voice deep and controlled. The man swallowed hard. Everyone who matters, boss. They think she's leverage. The word cut through the air like a blade. Cassian knew what that meant. Rival families would come, not for her, but for the message her death could send. He motioned to one of his guards. Take her inside, now. Anna resisted. No. Tell me what's happening. His tone softened, just enough to make her stop. You said you'd stay where the truth is. The truth is dangerous right now. She saw it. The flicker of fear he tried to hide. The same fear she'd seen in his reflection by the firelight. He wasn't afraid of his enemies. He was afraid of losing something he didn't yet understand. Inside the mansion, the corridors felt narrower than before. She could hear raised voices in the distance, commands, footsteps, and the faint hum of security systems coming to life. The house that had been her prison was now a fortress. Cassian returned minutes later, coat damp from the rain. His expression was unreadable, but his silence said everything. They'll come for you, he said. And I can't let them, Anna frowned. You can't keep me locked away forever. You don't owe me your war. He looked at her then, not as the man who ruled the city, but as someone who had lost too much to risk another mistake. You don't understand. It's not about owing. It's about not repeating the same sin twice. She hesitated. Who was she? The question hung between them. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, with a voice stripped of command, he said, My fiancé. years ago. They took her because of me. I paid with half my soul to get her back. It wasn't enough. Anna's breath caught. You couldn't save her. I tried. I failed. She was innocent like you. I swore I'd never let another woman bleed for my choices again. Her gaze softened. And yet, here I am. He met her eyes. Yes, here you are. And every time I look at you, I hear what I buried. What's that? That I still know how to feel. The room fell silent except for the rain whispering against the windows. He turned away, trying to bury the tremor in his voice. They'll come before dawn. I need to move you somewhere safe. You mean hide me? Protect you. She stepped closer. You don't have to protect me like a secret. Let me choose too. Her courage disarmed him. For the first time, he saw her not as the frightened woman he'd taken by mistake, but as someone standing firmly in a world she didn't belong to, refusing to be a victim of it. You shouldn't care about me, he said quietly. Then stop making it so easy to, she replied. A ghost of a smile touched his lips before fading. You don't know what kind of man I am. I know you're the kind who feels guilt for something no one could have changed. The kind who pretends control so you don't have to face pain. Pain is a luxury I can't afford. Maybe not, but healing is the debt you've been running from. He took a step toward her, eyes searching hers. Why do you speak like you already forgive me? Because someone should, she whispered. A sudden crash interrupted them, glass breaking somewhere downstairs. Cassian's hand moved instinctively to his gun. Stay behind me, she obeyed, her heart pounding. Outside, shouts erupted. The guards responded quickly, but the sound of struggle echoed through the hall. Cassian's right-hand man appeared at the door, face pale. They're inside. How many? Too many. Cassian turned to Anna. You have to trust me now. I already do, she said, and in her voice there was something stronger than fear, faith. He led her through a hidden corridor behind the bookshelf, narrow and dimly lit. The passage smelled of dust and secrets. This way, he said. It leads to the cellar. You'll be safe there. What about you? He stopped, meeting her eyes. I'll end what I started. Cassian, don't. But he was already gone, disappearing back into the shadows he once ruled. She pressed her hand to the cold stone wall, whispering a prayer not just for safety, but for him. Outside, the sounds of gunfire began to fade, replaced by the low hum of thunder. The storm was returning. Then came footsteps, slow, deliberate, not his. Anna's breath caught. A door creaked open at the end of the corridor. A figure stepped through, holding a gun. Found you, a voice said. She froze. The man's eyes gleamed in the dark. He was one of Cassian's traitors, but before he could raise his weapon, a shot rang out behind him. He fell without a sound. Cassian emerged from the shadows, smoke still rising from his gun. You said you trusted me, he said, breathing hard. Don't stop now. She ran to him, but before words could form, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. You shouldn't have to see this world. I'll finish this tonight. She held his wrist gently. You don't have to face it alone anymore. He looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing the shape of her defiance. If I survive this, he murmured, you'll never have to hide again. As he turned to leave, she whispered, then come back and prove that mercy can live in a world like yours. He paused just once and said, if I do, it will be because of you. The cellar door closed softly, sealing her in safety, but not silence. She pressed her palms together, whispering a plea for him to find not just survival, but redemption. Outside, Cassian stepped into the rain again, the storm no longer something to fight against, but something that finally understood him. The night would decide if a man who ruled through fear could find his salvation through love, and somewhere in that choice, she waited. The storm raged through the night like a confession that refused to end. Cassian's men scattered across the property, defending a fortress that was no longer about power, but about one woman hidden beneath its floors. Down in the cellar, Anna sat by the faint glow of a single lamp, Every sound above, every echo, every step sent her heart racing. She wasn't praying for herself anymore. She was praying for the man who had just risked his empire to keep her alive. Hours passed. The noise began to fade. Then silence, deep, uncertain silence. When the door finally opened, she rose so quickly that her knees trembled. Cassian stood there, drenched in rain and smoke, the sharp scent of gunpowder clinging to his coat. His hands were scraped, his shirt torn, but his eyes were steady. "It's over," he said. She rushed to him before she could stop herself. "You're hurt." "I've been worse," he said, almost smiling. "They won't come back." He sank into the nearest chair, exhaustion pulling at his movements. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint drip of rainwater from his hair onto the stone floor. Finally, Anna broke the silence. "You could have left me." "I could have," he said, "but I didn't." "Why?" He looked at her, something raw flickering behind his calm. "Because the last time I watched someone innocent die because of me, I buried the man I used to be. Tonight I thought maybe there was still a part of him left to save." She knelt beside him, hands clasped loosely in her lap. "There is. I've seen him." He gave a faint, tired laugh. "You shouldn't believe in people like me." "Then maybe that's exactly why you needed someone who still does." Cassian tilted his head back against the wall, closing his eyes. "You talk like someone who's never seen what men become when they lose everything." "I teach stories," she said softly. "All stories are about loss, but the best ones are about what we do after." He opened his eyes again. "And what would I be in your story?" "The man who forgot how to love until he was forced to remember." He stared at her, no mockery in his expression this time, only quiet disbelief. "You think love changes men like me?" "I don't know, but it's changing you." He wanted to deny it, to retreat behind the armor of command, but her words slipped past the walls he'd spent years building. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he wanted to rebuild them. A knock came at the door. Hesitant, cautious, one of his men entered. "Boss, everything's clear, but there's something you should see." Cassian rose, signaling Anna to wait. She caught his sleeve. "Be careful." He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. "You keep saying that, as if you think I have something left to lose." "You do," she said. "You just haven't realized it yet." He left, and the echo of his footsteps lingered long after he was gone. Upstairs, the house was littered with signs of battle, shattered glass, bullet holes, the faint scent of smoke. His men waited by the front door. One of them held a small box, old and wrapped in cloth. "We found this on one of the intruders," the guard said. "Your name's written inside." Cassian unwrapped it slowly. Inside lay a single photograph, a younger version of himself, standing beside the woman he'd lost. Her face had been crossed out in red ink. On the back, a message was scrawled, "History repeats itself." His grip tightened. Someone out there wanted him to relive his own tragedy, someone who knew exactly how to hurt him. He dismissed his men and stood alone in the dim hallway, staring at the picture until the ink bled into his fingers. He had sworn never to love again because love had made him weak. But now he understood. Love was the only thing that made him human. When he returned to the cellar, Anna was waiting by the door. She looked up at him, reading the pain in his silence. "They came for you," she said quietly. "They came for both of us," he replied. "Because you make me human again." She stepped closer. "And that scares you?" "Yes." "Good," she whispered. "That means you're still alive." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that only came from a man who had forgotten how. "I should send you home." "Should," she repeated. "But won't." His silence was the answer. She took a step back, giving him space. "If you send me away now, they'll keep coming. Not because of me, because they've seen you care. And they'll use that." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Then I'll burn down everything they touch." "No," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You'll build something instead, something that can't be destroyed." He looked at her like she had just spoken a language he hadn't heard since childhood. You really believe that's possible? I believe in what I saw tonight. A man who would rather bleed than watch another person suffer. If that isn't redemption, I don't know what is. He wanted to say something, but words failed. The air between them carried too much. Loss, hope, fear, and something unnamed that had already taken root. Outside, dawn began to break, painting the edges of the horizon with gray light. Cassian stood at the window, watching it as if seeing morning for the first time in years. Behind him, Anna spoke softly. What happens now? He turned slowly, eyes softer than she'd ever seen. Now, he said, you stay. Not because I'm keeping you, because I can't imagine this place without you. She met his gaze, and for a moment the world felt still. The walls, the rain, the echoes of violence, all of it faded beneath the quiet truth that neither of them could deny anymore. But outside those walls, someone else was already watching. A car waited in the distance, engine running, windows dark. Inside, a man's voice whispered into a phone. He's changed. She's his weakness now. And as the first light of day touched Cassian's face, the next storm was already on its way. The night surrendered to gray morning light, but peace never came. Cassian had ordered the guards to double their watch, though deep down he knew walls couldn't stop what was already coming. Enemies were predictable. The war inside him was not. Anna sat near the tall window of the library, wrapped in one of his coats. She had been silent for hours, her mind tracing every moment since the night she'd been taken. She didn't understand why her heart ached when he wasn't near, only that it did. He entered quietly. No command, no shadow of authority, only a man who had forgotten how to speak gently. You haven't eaten, he said. I wasn't hungry. You'll need strength. For what? She asked. To keep surviving something that doesn't end? He looked away. Sometimes survival is all that's left. No, she said softly. Sometimes it's what starts everything again. He studied her face, the calm that shouldn't have belonged to someone living under threat. It frightened him more than the guns outside. Anna, he began, then stopped. When I took you, I thought I was punishing another enemy. Now I can't even tell who I'm saving anymore. Maybe both, she said. Maybe you're saving the man you were meant to be. He almost laughed, but the sound died in his throat. And what kind of man is that? The one who just risked everything to keep someone else safe. He turned away before she could see the emotion rising behind his silence. Outside, the guards were shifting position. The city beyond the walls hummed with rumors about the boss who had gone soft, about the woman who had changed him. Cassian stood before the fire. They won't stop until they have what they want, and now that means you. Then let me go, she said. If my freedom can stop this, you have to let me. No. His answer was immediate, heavy. You think I could live knowing they'd find you without protection? You already live surrounded by danger. I'd rather face it than be hidden away while you destroy yourself trying to protect me. Her words cut deeper than any bullet. He turned, jaw tight. You don't understand how this world works. Then teach me, she said, because I'm already part of it whether I want to be or not. He stared at her for a long moment before exhaling slowly. You shouldn't have been taken, but maybe you were meant to be found. She blinked, unsure how to respond. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Do you know what happens to men like me when they start to care? They start to live again. He shook his head. They die slower. She reached out, her fingertips brushing the back of his hand. A fleeting touch, soft and human. Maybe dying slower is worth it if it means you remember what it feels like to have something worth losing. He looked at her hand, then at her eyes, and for a moment the entire mansion seemed to hold its breath. Before he could answer, his right-hand man burst into the room. Boss, we have movement at the east fence. They're testing us. Cassian straightened, the moment between them shattered like glass. Get everyone in position. No one fires until I say. The man nodded and left. Cassian turned back to Anna. Stay here. No matter what you hear, I can help. By staying alive, he said firmly. That's all the help I need. But she followed him anyway, keeping her distance as he moved through the hall toward the command room. From the balcony, she could see men spreading across the courtyard, weapons drawn, waiting for orders. Then, from the far corner, headlights appeared. A black car, alone, rolling slowly through the fog. Cassian motioned for silence. The car stopped at the gate. A door opened. A man stepped out, holding a white flag. Boss Cassian, he called. I come with a message. Cassian gestured for him to approach. The man walked until he stood just outside the iron bars. His hands trembled slightly. They say they don't want war. They want her. Anna froze behind the curtain. Cassian's voice was calm but deadly. Tell them they can have the whole city before they touch her. The messenger hesitated. They said you'd say that. They also said they know where she came from, her family, her school, her friends. A silence heavier than gunfire filled the courtyard. Cassian's men exchanged uneasy glances. Go, Cassian said coldly, and tell them if they touch a single soul connected to her, I'll erase every name they ever spoke. The man nodded quickly and retreated to the car. When the vehicle disappeared into the fog, Cassian finally exhaled. His pulse thundered, not from fear of the war, but from the thought of Anna's world colliding with his. She stepped out from behind the curtain. They know where I'm from? He turned sharply. You weren't supposed to hear that. You think I can just hide while everyone I love is in danger? Anna, I'll handle it. You can't handle everything, she shouted. You're one man, and they're not just coming for me. They're coming for what's left of your soul. He flinched as if her words had struck something buried. Then let them come, he said quietly, because I've already decided what I'm willing to die for. She shook her head. You can't keep living this way, Cassian. He stepped closer, eyes burning with conviction. Then tell me how to stop. Let go of the throne. Walk away from the blood, from the power, from all of it. Choose peace, not for me, but for you. He stared at her, torn between the only world he knew and the one she offered. If I do that, they'll call it weakness. Then let them, she whispered, because maybe love is supposed to look weak to people who've never known it. The words hit him harder than bullets ever could. He didn't answer. Not yet, but somewhere inside, something began to break. Outside, thunder rolled again. The first drops of rain hit the windows, steady and rhythmic. Cassian looked toward the storm and then back at her. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow I'll give them my answer. And though she didn't know what that meant, she saw it in his eyes, that the man who had once ruled through fear was about to do something that would change everything. But as the night deepened, someone else watched from afar, phone in hand, voice cold. He's turning against us. End it before dawn. And the war that began with a mistake was about to end with a choice. The wind howled against the mansion's stone walls, as if warning what was to come. Cassian hadn't slept. He stood in the library, staring into the fire that refused to die out, just like the war inside him. The words Anna had spoken still echoed in his mind. Choose peace, not for me, but for you. He wasn't sure he knew how. Men like him didn't walk away. They disappeared, one bullet at a time. But when he thought of her, the way she looked at him without fear, the way she spoke his name as if it still meant something good, a part of him began to crave what he had never dared imagine: redemption. Down the corridor, Anna awoke from a restless sleep. Her thoughts were filled with him. Not the man who had kidnapped her, but the man who had stayed by her side when the world burned. She didn't know why she trusted him so deeply, only that her heart no longer cared about logic. When she entered the library, Cassian didn't turn around. You should have stayed asleep. I couldn't, she said softly. You haven't either. He smirked faintly. Sleep is for people who still dream. Then start dreaming again, she said, stepping closer. Tell me what you see when you close your eyes. He looked at her finally, the firelight casting shadows across his face. I see everything I destroyed, and you, standing in the middle of it, asking me to be something I don't deserve. Maybe you deserve more than you think. Before he could reply, a guard entered, urgency in his steps. Boss, we've got movement on the west perimeter. Someone breached the lower wall. Cassian straightened instantly, command returning to his tone. How many? Not sure. They're organized. He turned to Anna. Go to the study. Lock the door and stay there. No, she said. If they came for me, I won't hide this time. Anna, you told me to trust you, she interrupted. So trust me now. We face this together. Cassian's jaw clenched. He hated how much she made sense. You're impossible. Then we're even. Before he could argue further, gunfire shattered the silence. The mansion's alarms roared to life. Cassian grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the marble staircase. Stay behind me. The halls filled with chaos, shouting men, footsteps pounding, the sharp scent of smoke and steel. Cassian moved like a storm, precise and lethal, every step protecting her. She had seen fear before, but what lived in his eyes now wasn't fear. It was devotion. They reached the upper floor when the explosion hit. The shock wave knocked them both to the ground. Dust rained from the ceiling. Cassian shielded her with his body, the heat of the blast rolling through the corridor. Cassian, she gasped, pushing against his chest. Are you hurt? He shook his head, breathing hard. Not yet. Through the haze, shapes appeared, men dressed in black advancing fast. Cassian pulled her into a side room and slammed the door shut. There's a passage behind the shelves, he said. It leads to the garage. Take the car and go east until you find the coast. There's a safe house. I'm not leaving you. He caught her face in his hands. If they catch you, I'll lose everything that's keeping me human. Please, Anna, go. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. And if you die, he smiled, small, broken, real, then you'll have to live enough for both of us. She grabbed his wrist, desperate. You can't make me walk away from you. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against her. You already changed me. Don't let it be for nothing. A shout echoed from the hall. Cassian turned, drawing his weapon. Go, he whispered. She hesitated one last time, memorizing him, the scent of rain on his clothes, the way his voice trembled only when he spoke to her. Then she ran. Cassian faced the corridor as the first intruder burst through the smoke. A single shot rang out, then another. The sound of war returned to his house. In the garage, Anna struggled to start the car. Her hands trembled, her heart refusing to obey the logic of survival. Through the shattered windows of the mansion, flashes of gunfire lit the night. She couldn't leave, not while he was still inside. She stepped out of the car and turned back toward the house. Every instinct screamed to flee, but something stronger held her there. Inside, Cassian fought his way through the hall, outnumbered but relentless. For every enemy that fell, two more appeared. He moved through smoke and blood like a man with nothing left to lose. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Anna running toward him. Anna, no! A man behind her raised a gun. Cassian fired before the man could pull the trigger, the shot echoing like thunder. He reached her and pulled her behind a column, breath ragged. I told you to go. You think I could live knowing you died alone? He stared at her, disbelief and awe mixing in his expression. You're going to get yourself killed. Then you'll have to protect me better, she said, voice trembling but defiant. Something inside him broke open. You are the most reckless woman I've ever met, and you are the most human man I've ever known. Another explosion ripped through the west wing, forcing them to move. Cassian grabbed her hand and led her down the corridor toward the courtyard. They burst through the main doors into the rain. Headlights blinded them. Another convoy, approaching fast. Cassian raised his weapon, ready for one last fight. But the car stopped, and men stepped out holding his symbol, his own crest, his remaining allies. A tall man called out, Boss, we came as soon as we heard. You're not alone. Cassian lowered his gun, rain dripping from his face. For the first time he believed those words. He turned to Anna. She stood soaked, trembling, but alive. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "I had to see how the story ends," she replied. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "It's not over yet." Behind them, flames rose from the mansion, painting the sky red. Cassian took her hand, guiding her toward the waiting cars. "We're leaving this behind, all of it." As they drove away, the burning house grew smaller in the distance, a monument to everything he'd lost and everything he'd finally found. In the back seat, Anna turned to him. "Where will we go?" "Somewhere no one knows my name," he said. "Where I can learn to live without fear. And maybe, if you stay, learn to love without it too." She smiled faintly. "Then that's where we'll begin." But as the rain washed over the windows and the fire faded behind them, Cassian knew one truth he could no longer deny. The war wasn't outside him. It was the one inside him that she had already won. And in that quiet victory, the man the world once feared finally bowed his head. Not to power, not to death, but to love. Dawn came softly, the kind of morning that felt almost cruel in its calm. The safe house stood miles away from the city, tucked between cliffs and the sea. Waves crashed against the rocks below, rhythmic and steady, like the heartbeat of a world that didn't know men like Cassian existed. Anna woke first. The room was simple. Wood walls, a single window, sunlight breaking through a thin curtain. She turned and found him by the balcony, shirt unbuttoned, a bandage around his shoulder. The sea wind moved through his hair, but his eyes were distant, caught somewhere between guilt and gratitude. "You didn't sleep," she said, her voice still soft from dreams. "I didn't want to," he replied. "Every time I close my eyes, I see everything I've done. It's quieter when I stay awake." She rose and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "It's quieter because you're scared of what forgiveness might sound like." He turned toward her, his gaze steady. "Forgiveness isn't something I've earned. Maybe it's not something you earn," she said. "Maybe it's something you accept." He walked toward her, stopping close enough that she could feel the tension trembling beneath his calm. "You think I can just walk away from everything I was?" "I think you already have," she said. "You left the fire behind. You walked into the rain. That's not something a monster does." For the first time, he let himself smile, not the cruel, practiced smirk that once hid his pain, but something fragile and real. "You have no idea how much I tried not to care about you." "Yes," she said softly, "I do." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was full. Every unspoken word between them hung there like breath they were afraid to release. Then the phone on the table buzzed. Cassian's expression darkened instantly. He crossed the room and picked it up. A message flashed on the screen. "You can't run forever. We know where she is." He cursed under his breath and tossed the phone aside. "They found us." Anna froze. "How?" "There are always eyes watching," he said. "But this time, they're not after me. They want to use you." She stepped closer. "Then let me face them." "No." His voice cracked like thunder. "I already lost one woman I couldn't protect. I won't lose another." "You didn't lose her because you failed," Anna said, her voice trembling. "You lost her because she never got the chance to see this side of you. Don't make the same mistake with me." Cassian took her hands, holding them tightly. "If they come here, there won't be a second chance. Then stop waiting for permission to live," she said. "If you really want peace, you'll have to stop fighting ghosts." He looked at her as if searching for a reason to believe her. Outside, the sea roared, wind scattering salt into the air. He reached for his gun on the counter, then paused. "I used to think this was power," he said quietly, staring at the weapon. "But maybe real power is learning how to put it down." She nodded. "Then put it down." He did. The sound of it hitting the table was small, almost tender, like the ending of a long confession. But peace, as always, never lasted long. A black car appeared on the cliff road. Cassian saw it first. He moved quickly, pulling Anna behind him. "Stay low." They won't stop, will they? She whispered. Not until someone does. The car stopped outside. Two men stepped out, both familiar, faces from the life he had buried. One of them, tall and sharp-featured, called out, "Cassian, the council sent us. They say you've broken the code. You chose her over the family." Cassian walked outside, his coat blowing in the wind. "Maybe I finally chose right," the man laughed. "You think you can rewrite the rules?" "No," Cassian said. "I'm done playing by them." He moved closer until they were only a few steps apart. "Tell the council this. The only thing I owe anyone now is peace, and I'll protect it with or without them." The other man lifted his gun. "Then this is your last sunrise." Before he could fire, Cassian lunged. The shot went wide, echoing across the cliffs. The two men struggled, their feet sliding in the gravel. Another shot, then silence. Cassian stood, breathing hard, the weapon smoking in his hand. The wind tore at his coat. The second man lay unconscious. The first had fallen to his knees. "You were one of us," the man gasped. "I still am," Cassian said. "But I'm not yours anymore." He stepped back, letting the gun drop into the sand. "Go tell them if they want to end this, they'll have to come themselves." The man crawled away, terrified. Cassian turned toward the house, his body trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of every choice he'd just made. Anna ran to him, eyes wide. "Cassian, you're bleeding!" He looked down and saw the crimson spreading across his side. "It's nothing," he said through clenched teeth. She helped him inside, lowering him to the couch, her hands pressed against the wound. "Stay still." He tried to speak, but she stopped him. "You don't have to talk. Just breathe." "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for bringing this to you. You didn't bring it. You ended it." He looked at her, the light in his eyes dimming but peaceful. "If I don't make it—" "Don't," she interrupted. "You promised me a tomorrow. Keep it." Outside, the sea wind howled, but the house felt still. Cassian's breathing slowed, his hand finding hers. "You were never my prisoner," he said. "You were my redemption." She pressed her forehead to his. "Then come back to it." His eyes closed. For a moment the world went silent. Then he took a long breath, and the color returned to his face. Anna exhaled, tears of relief falling onto his shoulder. "You scared me." He managed a faint smile. "I scare everyone. Not me. Not anymore." He looked at her with a warmth that no longer belonged to a man of war. "Anna, if people are still listening to our story, tell them this, that love doesn't fix broken men. It teaches them how to stand again." She smiled through her tears. "And tell them what happens when they stand. They kneel," he said softly, "but this time for the right reason." The storm outside began to fade, leaving only the sound of waves against the rocks. And in that quiet, Cassian Whitlock, the man who once ruled the underworld, finally bowed not to power but to peace. He took her hand, kissed it gently, and whispered, "Let's go home." And somewhere beyond the horizon, the first light of a new life began to rise. The sea carried the night away, and for the first time in years, Cassian awoke to the sound of peace instead of fear. The storm had passed, the horizon was clear, and sunlight reached through the window, painting the room in shades of gold. Anna stood by the stove, the faint aroma of coffee filling the air. When she turned and saw him awake, her face softened. "You should be resting," she said. He smiled faintly, his voice rough. "You sound like someone who's planning to keep me alive." "I am," she said. "Someone has to make sure you don't go looking for trouble again." He sat up slowly, his body still sore but lighter somehow. "It's strange," he murmured. "The quiet feels louder than the war ever did." "That's because silence asks harder questions," she replied. "And you're finally listening." Cassian took a deep breath, the air salty and clean. "I didn't think I'd live long enough to start over." "You have," she said, "and you're not starting over alone." He looked at her for a long moment, the sunlight reflecting in her eyes. "You really believe there's a place for people like me in the world?" "I believe there's a place for anyone who decides to change, and you decided He reached for her hand, his fingers rough but careful. I spent my life kneeling before power. The first time I ever did it willingly was for you. She smiled gently. Then don't stand up yet. Stay where peace found you. The sound of waves filled the silence between them. Outside, the ocean shimmered, as though it too had been waiting for this moment of stillness. Cassian rose from the bed and stepped onto the balcony. The wind met him with salt and sun, carrying the scent of freedom. Do you ever think about the night it all began? He asked. Every day, Anna said, but not with fear anymore. I think about how something meant to destroy me brought me to you. He turned toward her. You shouldn't thank a storm for where it takes you. I'm not thanking the storm, she said. I'm thanking what survived it. He reached out, brushing her hair back. You're not afraid of me anymore. I never was, she said softly. I was afraid of losing you. The confession landed between them like truth, too big to take back. Cassian stepped closer, lowering his voice. You've seen everything I tried to hide. Why are you still here? Because somewhere inside all that darkness, she said, you were still looking for light. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, almost reverent. If people could see you now, standing here with the man who once took you from everything you knew, what do you think they'd say? They'd say it doesn't make sense, she whispered. But love never does. It only makes us human. He rested his forehead against hers. You're the only thing that ever made me want to be one. The sound of seagulls broke the quiet, their calls echoing over the cliffs. Anna smiled. You know, if someone told this story, no one would believe it. Then maybe they should hear it from us, he said. Tell them to write it down. Tell them to share it. She looked at him curiously. You want people to know? I want them to know that redemption exists, he said. That even a man like me can kneel not because he's defeated, but because he's finally found something worth surrendering to. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. Then say it to them, she whispered. Right now. Tell them. He turned toward the open sea as if the world itself were listening. To anyone who's ever lost themselves chasing power or revenge, he said, voice steady. Listen to this. You can stop running. You can still change the ending. You can still choose love. The words lingered in the air, carried by the wind until they vanished into the horizon. Anna stepped closer and slipped her hand into his. That was beautiful, she said. Maybe they'll believe you. They don't have to, Cassian replied. They just have to feel what we did. She looked out over the water, where the sunlight shimmered like forgiveness. So what happens now? He smiled, not the smile of a man who won a war, but of one who finally ended it. Now we live, he said, quietly, simply, honestly. She rested her head against his shoulder. That sounds perfect. And for a while, it was. But far across the sea, in a city where the smoke never slept, another man sat behind a desk turning over a silver ring engraved with Cassian's old insignia. He's alive, the man muttered. And he took her. A shadow beside him spoke. Do we bring him back? The man smiled faintly. No, let him live with what he's done. Sometimes peace hurts more than punishment. He set the ring on the table and looked out over the skyline. But if he ever returns, we'll be waiting. Back at the coast, unaware of the new storm forming far away, Cassian and Anna walked along the beach barefoot, leaving footprints that the tide would soon erase. Proof that even the fiercest lives could end softly. As the sun lowered, painting the ocean in gold and fire, Cassian whispered, If this were a story, how would you want it to end? Anna smiled, with no ending at all. Just the promise that love, once found, keeps finding new ways to stay. He nodded slowly, his gaze lost in the horizon. Then that's what we'll write. And as the light faded, their shadows merged into one, the ghost of a man reborn, and the woman who had made him remember that hearts can still kneel without chains. The sun was low, its light melting into the waves, turning the sea into a mirror of gold and ember. Cassian and Anna walked along the shore, the world finally still around them. It was strange, he thought, how peace could feel heavier than war when you weren't sure you deserved it. Anna bent to pick up a shell, smooth and pearled. "You know," she said, "when I was little, I used to believe seashells could keep memories, that if you held one close enough, you could still hear what you lost." Cassian watched her fingers close around the shell. "And what do you hear now?" She smiled faintly. "The sound of something starting, not ending." He reached out and brushed his thumb over her hand. "I wish I could believe in beginnings like you do." "You already do," she said. "You just don't recognize it yet." They sat on a rock overlooking the sea. The air smelled of salt and hope. For a while, neither spoke. They didn't need to. Every silence between them had learned how to speak without word. Cassian broke it first. "I used to wake every morning expecting betrayal. I built a life out of suspicion and revenge. Now I wake up and there's only quiet. Does it scare you?" "Yes," he admitted, "because I don't know who I am without the noise." "You're the man who stayed when running would have been easier," she said. "You're the man who chose to kneel for love instead of power. That's who you are now." He looked at her with a kind of wonder. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," she said softly. "But love never asked for easy, only for truth." A gull soared overhead, its cry fading into the wind. Cassian turned his eyes toward the horizon. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" "Every day," Anna replied, "but not with fear, with gratitude. Because every breath we take now is one we weren't supposed to have." He smiled, something unguarded and human. "You really believe we can have a life beyond all this?" "I believe we already do." He took her hand again, slower this time, letting the quiet hold them. The scars on his knuckles caught the sunlight, each one a reminder of the man he had been and the man she had found beneath the ruin. "You changed everything," he said. "No," she whispered. "You let yourself be changed." They stayed like that until the tide began to rise. The waves climbed over the rocks, cold and steady, washing the footprints they'd left behind. Cassian stood, the ocean wind tugging at his shirt. "I've lived most of my life taking things. Maybe it's time I learned how to give." "What will you give?" she asked. "Everything I have left." He turned to her then, his eyes no longer sharp with command but soft with devotion. "There's something I never said. That night in the mansion when I told you to run, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid you'd see what I had become, and still you stayed." "I stayed," she said, "because I saw what you could be." He nodded slowly, emotion tightening his voice. "Then let me be that man, for you and for the world I once broke." A quiet tear rolled down her cheek. "Then we start here." They walked back toward the house together, the last of the sunlight fading behind them. Cassian paused at the door, looking over the cliffs. The world that had once hunted him was far behind now, a ghost he no longer feared. Inside, the fire flickered again. Not the fire of destruction, but of life returned. Anna poured 2 cups of coffee and handed him one. "To new beginnings," she said. He lifted his cup, eyes fixed on hers. "To the woman who taught a sinner how to pray again." The waves answered from outside, soft and endless. As the night deepened, Anna wrote in her journal by the fire, her pen tracing each word carefully. Cassian watched her, his chest full of something that finally felt like peace. She read aloud as she wrote, her voice a quiet promise. "Once there was a man who ruled the shadow, and a woman who was never meant to enter them. He took her by mistake, but she became his reason to surrender. And when the world demanded that he kneel, he did. Not to power, but to love." Cassian closed his eyes, listening to her words like a prayer. When she finished, she looked up and smiled. "Do you think anyone will believe it?" He leaned forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "They don't have to. They just have to feel it." Outside, the moonlight fell over the water, silver and calm. The world had finally stopped spinning. Cassian held her close, his voice low against her hair. "If you ever tell our story, tell them it didn't end with forgiveness. Tell them it ended with peace." Anna smiled against his chest. "No," she whispered. It ended with love. And somewhere in the hush between the waves, the man who once made the world kneel finally understood that the truest power was not in ruling others, but in surrendering his heart to the one who never asked him to. The fire dimmed, the tide rose, and the world, for the first time in his life, was quiet.